Hello everyone and welcome home. Today we're back at it again with yet another The Ones Who Live review. And all I gotta say before we get into it is holy goddamn. If you thought last week's episode was a doozy, this one knocks it out of the park, stuffs it into a red canoe, and sends it down the goddamn river. As always, this review will be very spoiler heavy, so if you don't want it to be ruined for you, take your happy ass over to AMC Plus and subscribe so you can watch the future episodes when they drop Sunday mornings at 3 a.m. like only an obsessed sociopath would do. Now, grab your love notes, get your inked up iPhone 4s, and strap in, because this one is gonna make your head spin so fast you'll fall out of your helicopter seat. This episode opens up with a title card that reads, Years Ago. It's here we see Rick's first time in the city as a consignee. He's both amazed and horrified because the people there can never leave. He takes a stroll through a road with shops on it, and someone asks him for napkins. It's revealed to be Jadis, and she tries to make friendly conversation as Rick becomes angry. He doesn't care that Jadis saved him because now he's trapped. What's the point in being alive if you can't be with the ones you love? We then cut back to a few hours ago, right after Okafor, exploded. Rick knocks on Pearl Thorne's door as she's a mess. Crying over her dead mentor and worried about Rick, he then explains that a woman saved his life and he needs Thorne to not tell that she's an A. In honor of Okafor and Rick, she does. Now that's a friend if I've ever seen one. We then cut over to the rest of the conversation between Rick and Jadis from the end of episode 2. Rick begs Jadis to let them escape or to at least help Michonne escape, but Jadis tells Rick that if they leave, she'll tell the CRM about Alexandria. She also says that if Rick tries to kill her, she's put a file aside containing all the info about Rick and co. Rick begs, but to no avail. She leaves and we get the ever so beautiful title opening. We then come back to Michonne clearing the dead at the same place Rick did for years. His name now up on the wall with the most consecutive kills in one shift. It's here she shows the first instances of being an A as she saves fellow consignee Cleo. On her way out, she passes Rick in his uniform watching her. We're then treated to an inside look at Okafor's funeral where Beale gives a eulogy and talks again about Okafor's sacrifice and then his sword, which belonged to Revolutionary War General Hugh Mercer, who sacrificed his own life for the good of America just as Okafor had done for the good of all mankind. We then get to hear Thorne's backstory and how she met Okafor and got taken to the CRM in the first place. When Major General Beale once again pops out of nowhere and talks to Rick and Thorne and tells Rick he reminds him of the word pharmacon, a word that both means poison and the cure, foreshadowing maybe about how Rick could bring forth an uprising or lead people to salvation. Honestly, I don't care. I just want Ricky Dicky to get back home. Beale then asks Thorne to accompany him for a ride. Later on, Thorne shows up at Rick's apartment and shares the news that she has been promoted and got the echelon briefing. She confides in how she feels and tells Rick that Dana, aka Michonne, could be a liability for her, and Rick assures her that she won't be. Pearl thanks him again and right before leaving pauses in a way that could only suggest slight feels. I think this is a surprise Mouseketeil that'll help us later. After she leaves, Rick pours up a cup and gets to work plotting and planning an escape for Michonne, looking over maps and timing the charge drops that are used to disperse walkers. The next morning, Michonne is eating when she sees Rick headed her way. He passes her a note that tells her that tonight is the night, that she should go to a locker in the fitness center. Here he left her a key to get into the underground, as well as her sword. She heads off in the right direction and we see intercuts of Rick clearing the way for her. We then see Rick come to a clearing with a river. Michonne eventually makes it to the clearing where he left her supplies, and another note that says he isn't coming with, that this is the only way for her to get home to Judith, that he faked her death and she needs to go. But she is pissed. We then cut to Rick approaching Jadis and telling her that Michonne is gone, saying he faked her death and tells Jadis to go along with it. She then explains she'll be gone, but that she'll be on point for him. She gives him some sarcasm and asks if maybe he's staying there for her since she saved his life. But he rebuttals, telling her now she saved Michonne's life and that
you're a hero with a shit haircut.
What a sassy man. We then have Rick come up to Thorne as he sees Michonne didn't leave and is rage killing walkers, proving she is an A. This makes Thorne suspicious. In the next scene, Rick confronts Michonne, who pulls off his helmet fast as hell as he tries to express how heavy the situation is. But she doesn't care. She's mad as fuck, and she leaves when Rick says,
I said that if you love me, you'd go.
Michonne is then brought to the city for her first time in a very similar way as Rick. She walks through the same stretch of shops and ends up at a booth where a man does portraits on phones and TV screens. Michonne recognizes the work as the artist recognizes Michonne, giving her insight into some of Rick's past at the shop. We also get a Carl name drop, which is pretty fucking cool, and the gentleman tells Michonne to believe a little longer. kind of echoing Nat from episode 2. Michonne then meets up with Thorne and Rick as Thorne asks her how she liked the city, asks her to come with them somewhere. They bring her to the same field that Okafor brought Rick and Pearl, and she asks Michonne if she would accept all of the answers and that there's only one way to get those answers, while secretly pulling out her knife just in case Michonne says no. This causes Rick to pull out his gun to quote unquote back her up, but aka shoot her in the fucking head. Michonne accepts and leaves. Probably a little iffy that Thorne called Rick her family, and then Thorne asks Rick about why he drew his sidearm, and starts to become a little suspicious. We then fly over to the Cascades, where Thorne tells the other soldiers along with Rick and Michonne the plan to get rid of a couple hundred zombies in the area. She then tells Rick she no longer agrees with Okafor, and that Rick will be briefed soon. We then get to see all of the soldiers killing walkers in a densely fogged forest as Thorne has to stop carrying the bomb. In her absence, Michonne grabs it and runs into the horde. Rick grabs on, and they both run into the fog and then trigger the alarm. This draws hundreds of zombies in as it blows up, and Rick and Michonne run off behind a tree to make out a little more, because all he wants is her, even though he knows he can't have her. They then show back up to clear the last zombies as Thorne has a full ass fucking Shane moment, watching Michonne in her sights as she's about to pull the trigger, but then thank God Dale stops her.
Jesus.
Just kidding, Rick does, and then Pearl comes to her senses. Later that night, Thorne scolds Rick for what they've done as he tries to support it. Then, she tells him Beale wants to brief him and that Rick has to take Michonne back to Philly and has to do all of the shit refuel work on the way. While on the way to get Michonne, Rick runs into Jadis, who hits on him again and says Michonne hasn't seen her yet. And then of course, Michonne sees her. Rick grabs Michonne and tells her it doesn't matter and that it's over, that they're done and he's taking her back and will knock her out, put her on the boat himself, and ship her out. Michonne is livid. We cut to the pair on a helicopter in a bad storm as she just deadpans Rick. Like I'm talking amongst crazy turbulence, she is just eyeballing this man about to beat his fucking ass. But instead, she does the unthinkable. She grabs his ass and pulls him out of the goddamn helicopter. Holy shit. This episode has surpassed the last two and keeps bringing the plot twists. I couldn't predict a goddamn thing the whole time I was watching this, and I was just left speechless every time. Hell, it's hard as shit to even talk about because it just keeps taking left turns, and it's amazing. I am so very happy with the character development and more interesting liberties being taken for this show. It feels more real and grounded, and it's just like Rick to sacrifice himself for the ones he loves, because that's what this story is about after all. Love. Hey everyone, I hope you liked today's video, and if you did, please slash that like button. Like just 80s horror style, murder that like button. And please don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss out on any future killer reviews. And if you haven't, please, for the love of God, watch this show. If you're watching my reviews because you like me, cool, I like you too. But please go watch The Ones Who Live. It is so beautiful and well-rounded and just a very captivating piece of television. So please check it out, and I promise you won't be disappointed. As always, I'm your friendly neighborhood hometown killer, and I will see you soon.
You think I'd shoot Rick? That is my best friend. That's a man that I love. I love him like he's my brother. You think that's the kind of man I am?
That's right.
Well, maybe we ought to just think that through. Say I'm the kind of man gun down his own best friend. What'd you think I'd do to some guy that I don't even like?